everyone. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Joe Martin. I've been working with FileMaker for about 7 years and AWS services for the past 4 years. I've been the primary developer on Zulu for the past 2 years, and I was heavily involved a number of years before that. I'm curious, how many of you have actually have heard of Zulu or have gotten a chance to play around with it? And how many of you have actually integrated it into like a production environment? Cool, okay. So for those that don't know, Zulu lets you integrate FileMaker with the calendar application of your choice. Zulu lets you, so say for example, you've got a scheduling component in your FileMaker database where you're managing events. Zulu can take those events and push them to Apple Calendar, Google Calendar, or Exchange Calendar. And on the back end, Zulu uses a two-way sync to keep these events always up to date. So if you modified a record in FileMaker, you would see this event modified in your calendar, in Apple Calendar, Google, or Exchange. And conversely, if one of your users modified the event in Exchange, you would see that change get pulled back down into FileMaker. So one thing we really wanted to focus on with Zulu 4 was to make it easier than ever for developers to set up these calendars in FileMaker, sort of remove some of that initial setup overhead, and also make it a lot easier for users to subscribe to these calendars, to actually view your calendar data. So our first step in that direction to make the setup part easier was we've rewritten the publish script to run entirely within FileMaker. So we can watch a demo right here, but we've never left FileMaker for the entire publishing process. Now, previously, Zulu had to sort of analyze the fields in your events table, send those up to the Zulu server. The Zulu server would have to process them and build the field mapping, and then store that back in FileMaker. This entire process has been rewritten to be inside FileMaker. We've reduced a number of a lot of moving parts in that situation and removed a lot of the pain points that people were running into. So hoping that'll make things easier for people. Another benefit of moving the publishing inside of FileMaker is now your publish page is on demand. So previously you had to republish your calendars to see that, and now you're able to view it at any point in time. This was a common request we had from users. And this leads nicely into our next new feature, which this is more on the user end for getting these calendars set up on your users' devices. We've reconfigured the subscription URLs so that they're recognized by Apple Calendar as a calendar URL. So your users can subscribe to calendars with one click. So if we look at our publish page and we expand our subscription calendars, we get these URLs that when clicked will automatically open in Apple Calendars and add this calendar to your user's device. Now, you don't have to go to the publish page to click that link. This link can be emailed to your users so that all they have to do is open up their email, click on the link, and all of a sudden they're seeing your FileMaker events in Apple Calendar. And I think just to sort of prove that, we're looking at the event record in FileMaker, and we just saw the corresponding events in Apple Calendar. This next feature I'm particularly proud of. We've integrated with Autodiscovery for Apple Calendars to make it really easy to add calendars to your device. It's a little different from subscriptions, so let me talk about the difference there. Subscriptions, that one-click link you saw, subscriptions are read-only calendars. If you try to modify the event in a subscription or create new ones, you're not allowed to. The user is immediately denied. So these are read-only calendars. Subscriptions are good for, a very typical example of a subscription calendar is like US holidays. You don't want users modifying that type of calendar. You could also use this for sporting events or maybe a work schedule for your users. You want them to see the data, but you don't want them to modify it. If you need a little bit, you want to provide a little bit more control to your users, you need to set up a fully fledged CalDAV account, which is done in a slightly different way, but, and previously when you were adding the CalDAV account, you had to specify about 7 or 8 values. It was a little bit burdensome. Integrating with Autodiscovery has made that process a breeze, pretty much. We've gone from needing to capture 7 or 8 values down to just 3. So to add a CalDAV account now, you still need to come into System Preferences and add a new CalDAV account, but you can have them enter in the data in this format. We need the FileMaker username, the host name where Zulu is running, the FileMaker password, and then Apple Calendar is able to just figure it out from there. It's automatically going to add that calendar to your, it's going to add that calendar to Apple Calendars. And now we can modify these events. These events are, your users can change and update these events, and you'll see those changes propagate back to FileMaker. So the next big new feature in Zulu 4 is Apple Reminders. We were able to integrate with Apple Reminders so you can manage your to-do lists from FileMaker and have those show up in the Apple Reminders application on your Mac or iOS device. So, and I think a neat sort of side effect of this is we've sort of been able to integrate with Siri now. If you've ever said, "Hey Siri, remind me to call mom when I get home," you're creating a reminder. So now we can say, "Hey Siri, remind me to download the sessions when I get home." This will add a reminder to our Apple Reminders list, which propagates back to FileMaker. So we've created a FileMaker record just by using, just by talking to Siri. So I kind of want to do a little bit of a deep dive into reminders and cover all the features that we've added there. And first, I just want to start with the basics. The simplest to do possible. All you need for a valid to-do is just a summary or title of this to-do. So if we create a new record in FileMaker, we populate our summary field. I'm actually jumping over to Apple Calendars here to trigger the refresh, but we can see that show up in our Apple Reminders application. And if we mark this complete, you'll see FileMaker get updated with the timestamp that it was marked complete. You'll also see the status of the to-do change to completed. So you're able to tell when a user marks his tasks complete, his work items. Now, if we expand a little bit on that, we've got a couple other fields that I think can provide some additional nice little data points to your users. Notably, a due date, a note, and a priority on the reminder. So I've intentionally added a really long note here so we can see what that looks like, see if we can kind of break Apple Reminders. Priority is actually a number, which is a little strange, but essentially 1 translates to high priority, 5 medium, 9 is low priority. And the due date is when this task is expected to be done. It's fairly straightforward. So if you look, when you're looking at the reminders list view, you'll see that note sort of chopped off, but if you expand the information, we can see the whole thing. Also, you'll notice that because this is a high priority to do, we get 3 of those little exclamation points. And we also see our due date show up here. So just sort of things you can communicate to your users about what you expect to be done with this task. So the activity field is something I'm pretty excited about. The activity field lets you specify an action that should be taken for this reminder, a sort of programmable action, some sort of programmable an action we can take for this. I've got 3 examples I kind of wanted to show you here. When you say, like, hey Siri, remind me to call mom when I get home, you're actually creating a reminder with a phone call activity. You can also do a URL in the activity field showing, so that when this icon is clicked, it opens up a web page. And then finally, we can use an FMP URL protocol to actually run a script from an Apple reminder. And it's nice. FileMaker doesn't need to be running in the background for this to work. Just Apple reminders. They could get a notification. They open up Apple reminders. They click the actionable icon, and we've opened up FileMaker and run a script. So next up is timestamp alarms, and these are pretty straightforward. All we need is a timestamp, a date and time of when we want the user to see a notification for this reminder. Proximity alarms are the other type of alarm that you can apply to a reminder. A proximity alarm lets you show an alert to the user when they arrive or depart a location. You specify the latitude and longitude, the range that you want that you want to trigger this alarm, and the users will see a notification when they enter or when they leave that area. So actually, let me just back up for a second because I wanted to, well, if you kind of look past my FileMaker window, you can see where it says arriving null. So what I just did there was sort of the bare minimum you need for a proximity alarm. We need arrive or depart, latitude and a longitude. Now that will work, but I think the description, the result we see in Apple reminders leaves a little bit to be desired. Arriving null is about as not like uninformative as you can get. So if we build on that a little bit, so there's a couple ways we can build on that. We can add a location title, which will get a little bit more detail to show up. And you can see that it's showing our location title there, but it's still not great. We're still seeing arriving null right there. And what's worse is in the list here, where it kind of counts, where we're going to look at these reminders at just a glance, we're seeing arriving null. So to fix that, we need to use the complex title field. Now, the complex title field actually takes a URL encoded value. It's just part of the way that Apple reminders handles this sort of stuff. So you could, just type in like a single word there, devcon, work, home. That would all work. But because it's URL encoded, I thought it was kind of fun. You can actually URL encode an emoji, and you can store that in this field. And when we see this in Apple reminders, you'll actually see that emoji show up in our location. So that's how we fix our arriving or departing sort of view right there. Make it look a lot nicer. So I've kind of gone over these features individually, but I think that when you combine them, you can actually create something a lot more powerful. If we combine our activity field with the timestamp or proximity alarm, we can now have the user open a web page at a certain time or trigger a FileMaker script when they enter or leave a location. run this report when I get to work. Filtering to-dos is up next, and I kind of wanted to talk for a second about what filtering is and why you would want to do it. So let's say you're managing your tasks in FileMaker, and it makes the most sense to just have a single tasks table. But you don't want to have all of your tasks on one to-do list. You want to separate this out. You want to have a task list for Joe, or a task list for Jesse, or a task list for marketing, or a task list for development. So you want to filter down your tasks to who they should belong to. This is done by filtering your to-do list. And so we want to serve a subset of our tasks table to a specific to-do list. Now, how this is done, I kind of want you to consider the calendar record we're looking at right now. How Zulu, to get the reminders that belong to this specific to-do list, Zulu is going to go to the Zulu sample to-dos layout. It is going to search the account name field for the value Joe. The found set that it lands on, those are the to-dos that will be served for this calendar. And so just to show you an example here, we've got two to-do lists, one for admin and one for Joe. And if we go look at my to-dos table, you can see one of these is assigned to Joe, and we've got two assigned to admin. So if we go look in our Apple Reminders app, we've got two to-do lists, one for admin, one for Joe. The to-dos assigned to admin show up on the admin list and Joe, and the to-dos assigned to Joe show up on the to-do list for Joe. So that's how that works. Next up is script hooks. So let's say if a user creates a to-do, you want to be notified, you want to take some action after that to-do has been created and inserted into FileMaker, you would want to use the script hooks that we provided with Zulu. There are two script hooks. I'm only going to show you one. This is the post-edit script hook. So this will run after a to-do has been either inserted or edited. So if we add a to-do to our to-do list, we can see this. Oh, I'm sorry. This is inserted into FileMaker. I'm sorry, I didn't realize when I recorded this video, FileMaker isn't actually downloading the records from the database from the server correctly. But if in the script, what I was doing is when a to-do is created in our table, and if that to-do is assigned to Joe, we want to mark this high priority. And it's kind of funny because we can see that when we created this to-do, it was automatically changed to a high priority to-do. I wanted to, we've got about 10 minutes left. I wanted to sort of show you all some quick demos of the calendar syncing we have and then take a couple questions. So prior to Zulu 4, we've always been able to sync with Apple calendars, Exchange calendars, and Google calendars. And I wanted to show you a little bit about how that worked. So let's say that I'm just going to go ahead and create some random events here. Let's create 10. My random script. The summaries leave a little bit to be desired, but it just sort of shows us what we're sort of expecting for the dates and times for these events. So if I create these in FileMaker, I can jump over to the Zulu admin console where I already have these configurations set up just because I want to jump straight into the action for you guys. So let's sync these to Google. So after the sync runs, we can see that we have 10 insertions into Google. Those are those 10 records I just created. And if we go look at the the Google Calendar, sometimes you have to refresh, we'll see these 10 events show up in Google. Now I can modify these. Let's change this. Let's make this a little bit friendlier title. And if we come back to Zulu and we run our sync, it's going to see that those events were modified in Google, and it's going to go push them back into FileMaker. So if we come and look at FileMaker, I'm just going to search for that. We can see that we were able to capture that update. So that so we're able to integrate fully with Google Calendars. And we're able to do the same thing for Exchange. So I've already got 10 records here. Let's run a sync for Exchange and push these up there as well. So once this sync finishes, we should see, 10 insertions into Exchange. So let's jump over there. And there we go. There are our 10 events, and there's the Go Shopping one I modified in Google. So you can, it is. If we modify this event over here, we can sync that back to FileMaker. We should see one update on this sync. Oh, 10 updates. Yeah, there we go. And we can push that. We can push that over to Google, and there we one update to Google. If I refresh this, we should see, modified from Exchange there. So you can, it's an interesting way. You could use this to keep your Google calendars in sync with your Exchange calendars and up to date with your Apple calendars. You sort of have we wanted to give you a wide array of options when working with calendar applications, because you don't always get to choose what your users are using. So that's pretty much the gist of it. I wanted to see if you guys had any questions I could answer. Hey, yeah.
I don't know if I missed it, but sometimes issues with rewording
Recurring events. Yeah, we. So I would like to, maybe we could talk about that at the booth in a little bit, but just, we do offer support for recurring events for Google and Exchange, and recurring events do get fairly complicated pretty quickly. I think your best bet is to really stick with top level recurrence. Once you top level, when I say top level recurrence, I mean, this event should recur on Monday at 4 p.m. For 4 weeks or for 1 year. So and that's it. That's top level recurrence. Once you start, if you delete a child from that series, you create what's called an exception to the recurring series, and that's supported, and that works pretty well. But when let's say you go to the 3rd week of this recurring series and you say that, okay, this event shouldn't occur at 4 p.m., it's actually occurring at 5 p.m. on this day. You've created a modified child in this case. Now, it proved fairly difficult to force this sort of infinitely recurring object into a FileMaker data model. So what we wound up doing is having a parent. You have a parent for the recurring series, which defines the top level recurrence. The recurrence rule, as it's called. What days should this recur on? How long should it go? That sort of thing. And also in the parent record, you can store the exceptions, so the deleted children of this recurring series. Modified children are where things get kind of complicated. When you modify a child, any modification to a child of a recurring series turns it into a modified child. You could add one letter to that title, it's a modified child. If you know, typically you're rescheduling it from like 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. and that's another example of you're creating when you're creating a modified child that you need to keep track of, and you need to capture all of the data points for this modified child, because you don't know which data point is going to be different from the parent of this recurring series. So to handle that in FileMaker, we actually create an additional record for that modified child. So just to sort of go back over that, top level recurrence and exceptions are handled in the parent record for this recurring series. Modified children get their own records, get their own event records in FileMaker. And that felt like the best way to handle the complicated mess that recurring events can sometimes be. Yeah. Oh, yeah, yes, yeah. Zulu support, the question was, can you set Google and Exchange to automatically sync? And yeah, Google Zulu supports auto syncing. You just check this box and then you can set an auto sync interval. So I do want to say, just to describe how this works a little bit, auto syncs, after a sync ends, we wait for this interval and then we start the next sync. And that felt like the best way to do it, because you don't want your syncs trampling over each other. And potentially you don't want one sync to an insert event and then the other sync to detect that insertion and try, that would just be hectic. So we usually, we should be running no more than one sync at a time. Yeah. The question was, can you programmatically trigger a sync from FileMaker? That is not directly supported right now. Can you come by the booth? Actually, I think it's possible, but I need to talk to Jesse actually. Let's see. Hey, you had a question? Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah. Why don't we talk at the booth? Okay. Well, I'm out of time, guy. Oh, I'm sorry, one more question? The titles on the FileMaker side of this sync, that is coming from the display name of the calendar in your calendar record here. Sorry, I covered it up. The title name on the Google side of this configuration, that is the actual name of the Google Calendar. Maybe I should have named these something a little bit more unique, but so that's what this it looks like. Can I expand that? So that's what the configuration page is showing. The calendar in FileMaker that we're syncing to the calendar in Google. Hey. It does. FileMaker server is required. Yeah. Yeah. Typically, with one exception, upgrading should just be running the installer. And then your configurations and syncs, all of that should be preserved. You should just be able to run the installer and keep going. With one exception. And we're already over that hump. When we migrated from Zulu 2 to Zulu 3, we almost entirely rewrote the back end of Zulu, and people were forced to recreate all of their syncing configurations. So if you're just coming into Zulu now, this won't be a problem for you. But if you're using Zulu 2 now and you're thinking about upgrading, I do want you to be aware of that. Thanks so much, guys.